I welcome you to the first online Kashmir festival organized by Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora in association with I Am Buddha. Security Forces' contribution in countering Pakistan-sponsored insurgency in J&K during the last 31 years and its impact on Pakistan-China nexus on our northern borders. Whereas this is a topic, and in itself it is pretty broad, but seeing the highly decorated and highly skilled and very well informed and experienced officers on the show who have dealt with this insurgency for many decades, we would like to present to the organizers of this session uh, a broader picture as to where were we, then what happened, what is likely to happen, particularly in the changing context of international relations as far as they impact both South Asia and also Indo-Pacific region, and I would say internationally, because then you can't take Middle East out of it, and you know what all is happening there. Without wasting any more time, I think our first speaker is obviously because his first initial alphabetical order is A, and we go to General Hasnan. General Hasnan, as you know, is a well-known figure. I don't think he needs any introduction. He's a man highly decorated, and in his whole family, along with his revered father, they are one of the biggest decorated families in the whole, perhaps in the whole world, if I'm not mistaken. Therefore, we will go to General Hasnan, and I will request General Hasnan to please start his presentation.
Thank you, Colonel Tikku. Thank you very much. What a pleasure and honor to be on such a reverend panel as this, and in such an important event at such an important time. I know the time is very limited, so I should start straight away, and I'll try to take 12-13 minutes as you have advised. I will try and be as comprehensive as possible, and what I will do is essentially flag a few issues, touch a few bullets. I will not go deep into detail at any time. Why we talk about the contribution of the security forces? No doubt, we should start with the failure. The first failure was to prevent our inability to prevent the genocide of the Kashmiri Pandits. I think that should be at the back of the mind, but there is a reason for it. I have spoken about this on a video which went very viral all over the country, and I did mention the fact that the Indian Army in particular was hamstrung at that particular time with 100,000 troops in Sri Lanka, with the northeast burning and Punjab burning at the same time, and a major exercise from Pakistan on our borders, exercise Zarb-e-Momin, which was taking place. And therefore, with the kind of troops that we had in the valley, it became a huge challenge to actually prevent this from happening. Besides that, perceptions of this kind of a thing just did not exist. Obviously, experience only to tend to take the correct decisions. At that time, we just did not have that kind of experience to deal with low-intensity conflict operations of this nature. So starting with that, I think Pakistan exploited the absence of the Indian Army from Kashmir very effectively at that time, but the Indian Army or the security forces bounced back. Conflict initiation was very limited. First 2-3 years, very limited. We managed to limit the internal things which were happening, the internal turbulence which was happening at that time, and that is the reason why Pakistan had to induct a large number of foreign mercenaries into the valley. We managed to defeat this entire thing by 1996, and 1996 the elections were held, which is a very important landmark. The return of democracy to Kashmir, although 2%, 5%, 7% turnout did take place, but it happened. Why am I mentioning this is exactly what is happening now. With the return after abrogation of Article 370, everyone was placing fingers against India on the issue of democracy. You find now restoration of democracy to some extent. District Development Council elections have just taken place, and in that backdrop we are speaking, and we are awaiting the elections of that, which will dictate to a very great extent how the political narratives after this will be played out. Conflict progression was completely under control in the 90s, led to Kargil. We defeated Pakistan in Kargil. 2001 was one of the very important years. I'm just outlining to you the history of this. 2001 was a very, very important year. It was the year in which we killed 2,100 terrorists. I may remind Vaid Saab. Vaid Saab has been there continuously over a period of time, and he knows this very, very well. 2,100 terrorists. That was the height of terror attack. By 2007, things had changed. And then I'd like to remind again, Vaid Saab, with his assistance, that in this 6 years, a lot of things happened between the Indian Army and the Jammu and Kashmir Police in particular. The construction of the fence, LOC fence. The creation of a very, very strong layered counter-infiltration grid. And that led to more terrorists being killed than the number which could infiltrate into Indian territory. This year, you can see the outcome of that, with 32 confirmed infiltrations this year, when you've had over 200 terrorists killed. So this is a major contribution of the security forces, there's no doubt. Conflict stabilization was achieved by 2008. And we awaited political initiatives, we awaited initiatives of psychological type, governance initiatives, but none of this happened. This conflict would have been behind us perhaps if things had been taken into hand much, much earlier. We gave an intellectual understanding of conflict to the political leadership, to everyone who mattered otherwise, but somehow the understanding of the dynamics of this entire conflict, proxy war in Kashmir, could not be really clearly understood. Until the time when the generational change took place with Burhan Wani's coming. And Burhan Wani's killing in 2016 on the 8th of July led to a stark change, which happened. We started understanding the dynamics far, far better. One of the major things we understood was that it was the terror networks, more than anything, which ran this entire proxy conflict. And from 2016 onwards till 2020, we have been able to dismantle much of these overground worker networks, these terror networks, which had enabled this entire. Of course, Article 370 abrogation was preceded by a series of events. Why I'm mentioning this is a very important aspect. Burhan Wani's killing, the Uri attack, thereafter the surgical strikes, thereafter Operation All Out, which led to a large elimination of a large number of terrorists, Pulwama. And all this is in sync with what was happening in the Sikkim border, Doklam, at that time in 2017. 2019, you come to Pulwama, and thereafter the Balakot strike. And 4 months later, after the elections, you have the 5th of August decisions of the abrogation of Article 370. This is one of the major chain of activities which has led to what is happening in Ladakh today in as far as the standoff. Why do I say this? I've been writing on this extensively to tell people, explain to them that essentially what has happened is that in 4 years' time, from 2016 to 2020, India's confidence, strategic confidence, has gone up by many miles. Achievements, starting the surgical strikes and ending with the 5th of August. In the middle, the creation of this, the CDS, the so-called Direction for the Theaterization System to begin. It is all projecting a sea change in security dynamics as far as India is concerned. This is not something to the liking of Pakistan and China. Both of them are concerned about Gilgit-Baltistan, and we have extensively put our claims on Gilgit-Baltistan and on Aksai Chin. We have published the maps on the 1st of October 2019, the blue portion showing the whole of Ladakh, the golden portion showing POK, along with the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Not to the liking of anyone. And that is one of the reasons why, contributory reasons, I'm not calling it the only reason, one of the major contributory reasons which led the Chinese and the Pakistanis in collusion this time to try and coerce India to ensure that our strategic confidence is diluted to a much greater extent. Now, coming back to the internal aspects of Jammu and Kashmir, in the year 2020, we have much better control of the situation. It's not just a question of killing terrorists. It's a question of getting hold of terrorism. Terrorism is a machinery driven by various dynamics. One of the dynamics is radicalization, which we have to work much harder to counter. To do de-radicalization, we have still not been able to achieve our intentions, and the methodology that we have followed so far have not produced the desired results. We have, besides this, we have killed a lot of terrorists, etc., but the situation at the moment is not. Even from the Jammu border, you are still finding infiltration taking place. And the potential of those infiltrations reaching the Kashmir Valley and a major event once again taking place, which means that the overground worker networks are still intact. And we therefore have to go after these networks. The NIA has done a fantastic job. The Jammu and Kashmir police has done a very good job. The syncretization of these forces with the army together and this is amazingly high as far as efficiency is concerned at the moment. Let me quickly, I've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'll quickly go into some of the issues which Colonel Tiku had asked us to flag. The aspect of Afghanistan, unlikely to directly affect us. I've always been mentioning this is not 1989. The possibility of foreign mercenaries entering into this conflict is that much more limited today. I don't think the United States is going to withdraw completely from Afghanistan, at least any time in the near future. I don't think the solution is there anywhere on the cards at the moment. Even if it does happen, Pakistan is going to find itself very deeply embroiled in Afghanistan, in the management of Afghanistan affairs. If they don't do it, there's going to be a major upsurge all over their western borders. Good for them. We should be very happy about it. A possibility of a big action in Kashmir remains primarily because Pakistan is sensing that it is losing out. 2020, they have not been able to do anything big. They have been able to achieve something on the borders, but to try and show themselves to be in sync with the Chinese interests, they will attempt to try and up the ante as far as the hinterland of Kashmir is concerned. They've been making efforts on the line of control, a tremendous amount of firing, over 4,000 ceasefire violations, which is the highest we've had for many, many years, have taken place this year. Unfortunately, we've been losing a lot of men this year, and this is something of concern as far as I'm concerned for the Indian Army. I'm not happy with that situation at all. As far as the fissures in the Organization of Islamic Conference is concerned, happy to see it to an extent, but if you see the manner in which the recent resolution was passed in the OIC with the inclusion of Jammu and Kashmir, it did show that kind of a passion which existed. It was resisted to a great extent. The Pakistani attempt to try and raise the whole JNK issue was hardly discussed, but it was mentioned in the resolution at the end. What is very clear is that the OIC isn't turbulent. There is an internecine kind of a conflict between the Saudis, the Turks, which is taking place. At the moment, Pakistan is in the bad books of the Saudis and the UAE, two very, very important countries. And this is something where we find the door is open. We need to make sure that we take control of the situation to ensure that Pakistan's flag is not seen to be flying too high as far as the OIC is concerned. Last 1.5 minutes for me. The emergence of new political forces. I think we have to await the DDC elections results. Next 1 or 2, 3, 4 days when it's coming out, we should be able to determine what exactly is happening. We've been devoid of political activity in Kashmir for some time. For me, one of the major issues is that I would like to see the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir coming together as far as the two parts are concerned, divided by the Pir Panjal. This cannot have a status in which these two parts do not see eye to eye. All kinds of measures we need to be taken, which can always be discussed. The return of the Kashmiri Pandits to Kashmir is contingent upon this relationship. It's a very, very important aspect which needs to be pursued by people who understand the social dynamics of Jammu and Kashmir. The last part, the return of the Kashmiri Pandits. This is the time when I have been one person who resisted this for long, when I've said I would not like to see people coming in bits and pieces like this. I would not like to see them coming and having a security threat around them. I would not like to see islands being created, etc. But today I'm a little more confident, and I'm looking at potentially seeding the valley with the presence of the Kashmiri Pandits. Earlier, I was always recommending the culture, the Kashmiri Pandit culture, Hindu culture of the Kashmiri Pandits needs to be reinforced in the valley. Thankfully, they've done it over a period of time. A lot of yagnas, a lot of pujas, which have carried on. Very, very good. Now we need to start seeding this. How do we seed this? We have to take bold decisions at this time. Security. If we are creating some islands in some places, it has to start in that manner. Then we have to carry out full security. The Jammu and Kashmir Police, CRPF and the army had put their heads together for this. And we have to defeat the radical content in the valley. That will signal the best message to the Kashmiri Pandits and the best signal to the international community that things in the valley have virtually returned to normal. So that is the way forward, I would say. The last part, there is no doubt about it. At the end of the day, it is a question of balancing the hard and the soft elements of your strategy. Today is a time when you still need 30-40% of hard power and the capability to hit back inside POK if required. But I think the major part of your strategy today is to return to soft power, the use of politics, the use of many other social aspects to resolve this internal aspects of the conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Hasnan. I must tell you that this is for the first time I have heard a rationale being given as to why the army deployed in Kashmir in 1989 on that terrible night of January 1990 could not prevent the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits on that, because it started on that night, the massive exodus. And this is for the first time I hear a very, very responsible person giving the reasons as to why Indian Army did not intervene and prevent our exodus. But this is an issue which we have not really discussed in detail, because Army's security was so deeply embroiled in fighting insurgency. There's no point questioning their what could have been or what should have been done at that time. But I am very happy you brought out this point. I am sure there will be much more debate in the years to come, because this is something that has not been debated till now. Thank you so much. You touched almost all the points, and if we have any questions, we'll see if there is time at the end of the debate, and then you could answer them if there are some directed towards you. We shift to our next panelist, that is General Harsha Kakkar. He's an extensive writer, and in fact, he writes very regularly for the magazine of the organization that is mouthpiece of All India Kashmiri Samaj, DAD, and he has been very, very active in the field of security, in the field of insurgency, in the field of Kashmir as it exists in the international environment, particularly in South Asia. So without wasting any more time, sir, the stage is yours. General Kakkar, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Surinder Kaul and Colonel Tikku, as well as the Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, for actually conducting this webinar of the topic of which is current and would remain till the time peace in Kashmir is restored, normalcy returns, and those who were forced to leave come back. The basic cause of militancy, as General Hasnan said, I mean, I am no one who can even match him a percent or two. But let me say that it is basically the obsession of Kashmir with the Pak army. There have been 4 wars. In every one, Pak has been humiliated. But yet, it continues with the same approach. The fact when it took off, the first of the militant organizations was JKLF. Now, when JKLF came into being, the concept there was an independent Kashmir. Of course, the darkest phase of militancy, that is January 1990, was when JKLF was the main one. With the additional groups having come in 1994, and at that stage of time, some veterans of the Afghan Jihad having come in, the concept of Pak-based militancy switched from demands for independence to joining Pakistan. Now, this switch which took place from independence to joining Pak brought about a lot of change within the valley. And this phase, as General Hasnan said, continued till about 2012. We've had ups and downs. Of course, in 2012, while the elections of 2002, General Hasnan had covered, but in 2012, the valley was near normal and had almost 1.3 million tourists who visited the valley. And surprisingly, despite that, he's been bringing it down. The political environment have not taken advantage of the scenario. 2013 was the launch of use of social media. This was a phase which was absolutely different. Militants were popularized, glorifying violence, glorifying terrorists post the elimination by being given gun salutes, mass funerals by what was organized, or the organizations of which was the funeral brigade. It only incited more to join. But there was a difference. The majority which joined post 2013 could not cross the LOC for training in Pak due to a strong counter-infiltration game. Hence, they remained purely trained. But the only benefit which it gave the Pak militants was that with the increased presence of local militants, the foreign militants were able to gain local support, which was something which they had lost in the interim. The political leaders from the valley were aware of the drawbacks but were unwilling to change perceptions, basically on account of fear of vote banks. And General Hasnain and the others will bear out, and including Mr. Vaid, there were political pressures on the forces. There were accusations on human rights. Flake claims were being pushed against the forces. Even a coalition which was formed with any party outside the valley led to threats. The PDP-BJP coalition of 2014 led to a revolt from the Jamaat-e-Islami in South Kashmir. The rebellion which followed, or in fact the mass uprisings which followed after the elimination of Burhan Wani, was a cause of this. As far as the army is concerned, it's been handling it for 3 decades. For a large period of time, they were treated as outsiders and they were attacked from all directions. Militants on one side, local supporters on the other, lack of intelligence inputs, pressures of false cases, pressures of human rights cases. Whole lot of things were acting against them. The RR, as soon as they started settling down, they were the ones who began changing the scenario. And that is how things started taking a turn for the better. Politically, if you look at it, J&K has always been dominated by valley-based political parties. The National Conference and PDP, with some amount of Congress-led governments. The Hurriyat, without really deserving it, has always projected itself as the voice of the people. And somehow it managed to convince governments at the state and the national level that they were the major stakeholders. But their stance remained always pro-Pakistan. It was evident, even the governments knew that they were funded and supported from there. The valley-based political parties continued to toe the Hurriyat's line, mainly to secure their own vote banks. There is no valley politician who still does not voice the same thoughts of talks with Pakistan. The Hurriyat ran its overground networks, bankrolled by Hawala funds, supported violence, supported strikes, and pushed in indoctrination amongst the youth. And despite its anti-national approach, they were protected, supported, and treated as state guests by the state and the center. It was after August 5th and the imposition, it was basically the collapse of the BJP-PDP government, imposition of president's rule, and then the abrogation of Article 370 on 5th of August. If you look at this year plus, what have we actually achieved? Security-wise, infiltration is down by 50%. We've eliminated over 200 terrorists this year, mainly locals. The number of terrorists operating are supposed to have dropped from about 250 at an average to about 175 or 200. Recruitment has dipped marginally. This year alone, 15 militant group commanders have been killed. Most groups are leaderless. By stopping funerals of militants, arresting overground workers, controlling flow of funds, instigation of public for violence is reduced. The second major boon has been on the Hurriyat. They've been sidelined, their protection withdrawn, Hawala blocked, some of their leaders behind bars, illegal properties being investigated. They're currently no longer stakeholders, nor are they the voice of the Kashmiri people, nor do they hold the sway that they once possessed. Their statements are far and few in between. Even Pakistan has realized that they are a liability rather than an asset. The political parties were left rudderless after the abrogation when their leaders went under detention. Post the release, they joined together to form the famous Gupkar Declaration. They were aware, or they remain aware, that chances of reversing any decision on the article is difficult. But what worries them most today is the presence of the BJP. The BJP membership in J&K is up to 7.5 lakhs, with 2.5 lakhs in the valley itself. The numbers may not be large, but they're enough to challenge traditional parties. Today, the BJP has 14 municipal councils, 63 block development chairpersons, and over 1,300 panches and sarpanches. The only card with the current political parties of the valley, if they wish to exploit, is demographic change. It is this which has always been played amongst the youth of the valley, and they're fed with the belief of a Hindu Rashtra controlling a Muslim majority Kashmir. But with months of relative peace, no political rhetoric, some signs of democratic activity at the grassroots level, implementation of central government schemes, how much will this card continue is a question. In this complex scenario was when the DDC elections were announced. The fact that the BJP had dominated grassroots democracy compelled the valley political parties to reconsider their approach. They knew if they participate independently, the infighting amongst them would only benefit others. Therefore, they participated jointly. Now, globally, India faced immense criticism for deployment of additional security forces, blocking internet post-abrogation 370. We had to brief multiple nations on reasons why we adopted this step. While some aspects were complied with, democratic processes were pending. These elections, with participation of all stakeholders, was a strong message on recommencement of the democratic process. This announcement itself led to desperation within PAK. PAK's obsession with Kashmir is well known. It claims it needs Kashmir for religion, but basically it is for its sources of water. And the PAK army needs an enemy to justify its budget, strength, and power. As long as the army controls the PAK narrative, there is no way that there could be peace in any talks. This despite it failing everywhere. The abrogation of Article 370 took PAK by surprise. A year later, Islamabad has still not been able to internationalize the Kashmir dispute. Its attempts to rope in China and raise the issue at the UN and OIC have failed. Its issue of the map, including Indian J&K and Ladakh as part of Pakistan, has led it nowhere. Its biggest worry remains the FATF, which has forced the ISI to alter its Kashmir strategy. It's remaining on the grey list and just about staying out of the blacklist with its 3 supporters is all that is enough for it to know that it can do nothing much. Even the POK Prime Minister has been upset with Imran Khan and Bajwa on their failure. Their recent dossier on Indian support to anti-PAK terrorist groups was anyway a big failure. It is today realized that successful conduct of the DDC or the District Development Council elections would lead to all its claims on Kashmir being under military rule being proved false. It had to plan a major strike, but within limits of Indian tolerance. It cannot risk another Balakot. The 4 militants that were killed at Nagrota recently gave India an opportunity to exploit the situation. It was an opportunity for India to send an open warning to PAK that any action on Indian side, any action during the elections would be crossing Indian red lines. PAK, in the process over the last 1 year, has lost its own allies in Kashmir. The OIC, dominated by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have refused to support PAK on Kashmir. They've been warning PAK to lay off Kashmir, but PAK has been failing to do so, basically on account of internal compulsions. It received support from Turkey and Malaysia, and which is what compelled it to change its tack and possibly lead to try to get a split within the OIC. Today, with Middle East nations moving closer to Israel, Pakistan would remain more isolated on Kashmir. And as General Hasnain said, the recent OIC foreign ministers meeting and that statement on Kashmir really doesn't have much value, and therefore it's been ignored. Currently, the valley is witnessing a period of relative calm. Confidence is flowing from the successful conduct of the election. The results would project the views of the people, whether they seek to follow the agenda of the Gupkar Declaration or they've accepted the abrogation of Article 370. In any case, the lack of violence and participation of the public indicates that the next step of democratic process will now follow. What the government should now do is to push through two aspects: development projects and educational institutes. The reason for educational institutes is much more. It is through education that we can change mindsets and reduce levels of radicalization. There have been promises of opening over 600 colleges and far more institutions of technical and specialist training. This is a priority. Unless we reduce levels of radicalization, we will not be able to create an environment for the return of Kashmiri Pandits back into the valley. Where I would slightly differ with General Hasnain is to create the clusters of pure security area where we deploy them. Such clusters within a setup would be something like creating an area, something like what possibly Israel may look to create within Palestinian lands, with a lot of restrictions on the people. We need to reduce the impact of radicalization, which is already coming through slowly, and thereby opening it for people to come in with investments, and especially the Kashmiri Pandits returning back to their homeland. In conclusion, what I would say, India today is in a state of complete confidence on the way it's handled Kashmir and on the way it's growing in terms of its power. The fact, the announcement by the government in the newspapers yesterday that it is reconsidering opening back 4G networks in the valley indicates that it's possibly satisfied with the way security forces have handled the environment. Similarly, the fact that we've been able to control the global fallout, we've been able to control the scenario globally, we've been able to push Pak into a corner, we've been able to pull away its allies, and we've been able to compel it to somewhat temper its behavior as far as Kashmir is concerned. There is no doubt that with China alongside it, Pak will continue to activate the LOC. The chances of it activating the valley appear to be a bit less. That is something which it is slightly worried about because it is not going to waste another Balakot. The fact is that we cannot have any talks with Pak. We may be able to, in some time frame, resolve the LAC or possibly cool down the LAC with China. But talks with Pakistan is nowhere in the near future. The statement by our politicians on POK and Gilgit-Baltistan is going to continue the tensions as far as the region is concerned. One last part about China. China is now pushing itself into being a third party in the dispute. The reason is not Ladakh, in my perception. The reason is its investment in the CPEC, which transits through Gilgit-Baltistan. It fears more for its investments than the few areas in possibly Ladakh where it currently is. In conclusion, let me say for the Kashmiri Pandits who've been displaced, peace for them will remain elusive till they return to their homes in the valley. And that is something which we as a nation or we as security must set as a final goal, that this is our ultimate goal. How do we achieve it at the end of the day? Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Kakar. I think it was a wonderful presentation with, the security forces work, local politics, radicalization, Pakistan's involvement, India-Pakistan conventional threats which could materialize, or conventional serious issues that could crop up because when you cross each other's red lines, particularly when Pakistan crosses India's red lines, which is now been well laid out. And I'm so happy that the point is that security forces involvement in anti-insurgency operations is not a conventional kind of a war where you fight a known army across and civilians are not involved. It's a hybrid war, different kind of war, and we have been fighting it from early 1950s, starting from Nagaland. But Kashmir obviously was a different ball game because of its religious angle, Pakistan being directly involved, and many other issues. And over a period of time, I think the military leadership has learned that it is not merely controlling violence, which otherwise is a prime responsibility of the security forces, but it is much more than that. And I'm so happy you brought out all these issues so clearly, and I'm sure people are going to be educated as I was educated with your presentation. Thank you very much. We'll now move to General Sinha. General Sinha, you can see him on television almost every second day on issues related to national security. He's a Sikh regiment officer, a veteran of J&K, and more importantly, veteran of Kargil. And he is not merely there in the television debates by dint of the fact that he's a well-known face now, but more importantly, he's a student of international security. He's a student of insurgency warfare and conventional warfare also, and I'm sure it will benefit us immensely when he puts forth his views on the topic of J&K insurgency, which has been forwarded. Sir, the stage is all yours, General Sinha, sir.
Thank you, Colonel Tikusa. Jai Hind to everybody, and my greetings to all, especially the diaspora who will be actually participating in 1 month long celebrations, and the panelists. I'm feeling, very nervous, to present it in front of such an eminent panelists who are there, who are actually done things on ground. Now, without wasting time, on today's deliberations, I will try to, do it in 13, 14 minutes. And my endeavor would be to address at the macro level, the present and future context. Of course, I will keep it in the backdrop of what happened in the past. In my mind, this problem has a geostrategic and geopolitical implications, and not of a region or per se Kashmir Valley or something like that. And it has got, under this regional and global outreach, it has got. I take the topic first. When you dissect the topic, you find that, the topic itself, brings out very clearly that we are talking about Pak-sponsored insurgency, in which there is a, now support or nexus of China, exclusivity is there. We are talking about 31 years, a part of it. And what is the contribution of armed forces? To, initially start the contribution, I feel if this area is intact, it is the contributions of the security forces, like all those who are sitting over there. Mr. S.P. Bad is there, the armed forces as such, if this area is intact in my mind. Otherwise, it would have gone. And it started, 47 onwards, and we know how this area we were able to get it and still holding it. Now, Colonel Tikusa, you permit me, because you have given a time frame of 31 years. You give me a time, I want to just take it 10 years more back, because it is very important to understand what happened. 1979, I will take and include. See, problem, of course, Kakkar, he brought it out. It is from the day one, when the subcontinent got divided into different parts, the problem started. And every time the Pakistan is adversary now was part of us, they got obsession of Jammu and Kashmir from the day one, and they have not left it. And it is a continuation even today. Now, why I bring it 41 years back, not 31 years back, that is starting from, we are talking about 89 to till date, but I take it 79. What happened in 79? A very important thing, and that is what is the actual outcome which is happening on ground today. See, this is the first time ISI got a world-class recognition. Of course, ISI came up in 1948 only, but during, they got, and even the CIA, give the credit to them, they were able to break erstwhile USSR. And the whole credit goes, if you read and go and read the in detail, I have done it in Pentagon. The whole credit they gave it to ISI. ISI got you have to give the devil the due. This guy, what they did, what they were able to, from bipolarity world, they make it a unipolar world. Then the Russia was formed. And that time, I will give a couplet and it will sum up and I don't have to explain. Jago, jago, subah hui. This couplet used to be in Afghanistan. Roos ne baji hari hai. Roos has lost the battle. Hind par larjan tare hain. Now, the Hind is the lucrative target. Ab Kashmir ki bari hai. This is the time, 79, it started. And American got Zia-ul Haq. I'm bringing Zia-ul Haq important because this name has to be brought in if you have to understand what happened there. He was brought by CIA in 77, 2 years before 79, and remained 88, 1 year, the date which we are referring it, 89. He was killed and eliminated by CIA. He brought a strategy, and a strategy of 1,000 cut. And he brought one more thing, jihad, radicalization, which we are talking about and maybe have gone in detail. And very important, again, by couplet, you will understand. And especially the Kashmiri Pandit and the diaspora, people who are listening, they will understand better because this vibrated in Jammu and Kashmir, and I have seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ear. Hum kya chahte azadi. Hum kya chahte azadi, it is still vibrating. Azadi ka matlab, la ilahi illallah. And it started from Afghanistan. La ilahi illallah. Agar Kashmir mein rehna hoga, Allahu Akbar कहना होगा. You have to say Allahu Akbar. हम क्या चाहते यहाँ निजाम Mustafa. The couplet is long, and I think everyone is aware. So, in my judgment, Kusa, if you permit me, I will point out one thing, saying it is an insurgency, it is a terrorism, it is a militancy, it is a jihad. I think we are slightly wrong in it, our understanding. You call it in a spectrum of conflict, any name, I do not have any problem. Whether you call it a proxy war, whether it is a hybrid war, it is the same war. And it is unleashed on you in 79 onwards. And the blackest day of Indian history and modern history, a thing which I, as an Indian, will not accept, it not happen in India, is the day of 19 January 1990, which, of course, you are bringing it out, otherwise you would have lost this date. I'm grateful to this diaspora, which is bringing out and they are having a celebration of 1 month. Mind you, in the modern world history, it has not happened after Second World War. It was happened in 47 when a displacement of people have taken place. No country in the world has lost the independence after getting independence. India did. 10 million people were killed. When in 47, people got displaced. It happened on 19th January 99. And whatever we say, whoever is everyone is to be blamed, including me, you. It is not a security problem. It is politicians, diplomat, everyone, or whole India, 130 billion today people. We have to remind ourselves, we lost. You can't allow it happen only with the Jews and KP, Kashmiri Pandit. When in front of you, people coming from outside massacre and make sure they extort us. We can't hide behind that there was no forces. Where were Indians? I have not heard anywhere. I was commissioned by the time, and I was operating from Kashmir. I didn't hear. Mind you, from that day and until Tiku, I have done a soul searching, and that's why I'm speaking on this. Till September 2016, Uri happened. Our responses were same. soft, mild, faulty, accommodating Pakistan. Even to the extent we have gone, saying a strong Pakistan is very good for India. This was our diplomatical and political approach. And every time it was happening. During this time of 79, Punjab happened. Punjab got totally, only silver lining happened that the Indian armed forces occupied Siachen Glacier. Contribution in this region. And that's fruit we are today. If we are depending on that, that is because that divided China and Pakistan, especially in this area. Kargil happened, Parliament happened, 2001, 9/11 happened, 26/11 happened, Pathankot happened. Pathankot, even we got the people from ISI who's omnipresent in Afghanistan, omnipresent in Pakistan. They may not be omnipotent, but they were. And they are actually did it everything. See, saying it is an internal thing, internal is the manifestation. It is a long reach of these people who are actually doing it. You can't say the overground workers. We can't say the Hurriyat. Hurriyat was created by them and they were able to do it. And because our approach, our soft mindedness, which happened and carried on till our date, which September 2016, including the present dispensations, are same Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat, Kashmiriyat. Even we went to that extent of saying LOC and LC will become an IB. We worked on it. Agra summit took place. So our approach was something very. There was a nuclear thing came up. Then we started nuclear backstop. They get the opportunity when Musharraf came into the Kargil, which we all took part in it. We have the self-moratorium of not crossing. Gilgit-Baltistan would have been there. I was sitting inside Pakistan, 7 kilometers inside, in the Pune-Siari area, which is you can reach the Gilgit-Baltistan, but we had the self-moratorium on it that we will not do it. So I'm doing a soul searching, and Colonel Tikku and everyone on the panel. It is only the armed forces sacrifice, armed forces determination, including the restrictions, we were able to hold on till date. What happened in Uri? That is the whole game, because Uri is a deadline. There is a deadline of, I have given 1990. There is a deadline of 79. Then we took a very, very tough stand of that talk and terror will not go. We carried out all-out operations. General Kakkar talked about it. General Hasnan talked about it. And we even carried out after that the same thing we are carrying on. Surgical strike, air strike, Balakot. And this is, but everything happening as a retaliatory offensive. From a defensive mindset, we have gone a retaliatory offensive. I do not say it is a proactive. Still, it is not a proactive. We have not destroyed any of those, areas proactively. So still, I feel it is a retaliatory offensive strategy which we are doing it. Even this Nagrota has happened earlier also. Nagrota, what happened? It is a retaliation. They came. It is a good thing because this is the way the contribution of the security forces, they do it. With their everything, it is the police, CRPF, CAFEP, army, everyone is doing because, this is what the mandates are. I leave it here, come back again. Let me bring the China in this very quickly. In 1949, when the, Republic of China came up in the Mao's days time, if you go in doctrine, and it is their doctrine available, and we all must have all read it, they made a grand strategy. They said that for China, if they have to be a regional power, if they have to do something with that, the Himalayan regions, which includes, and General Kakkar brought it out very key, it is not that, starting from Gilgit-Baltistan right up to the eastern border, they have to dominate and take this area under them in whatever. They can not only Southeast Asia, Indian Ocean region, and also India, Indo-Pacific area, which we said. When the China got it, the China, then quickly I bring it out, it is same. Xi Jinping, when 2013 he came, he brought the CPAC. General Kakkar brought it out, and their concern is CPAC. CPAC, Gilgit-Baltistan, and this is the first time in 99 they didn't come in the support of Pakistan. But this time they want to Pakistan, and he is doing from 13 onwards. There are a lot of exercises and they want to jointly take this area. Not only that, what of the, the threat, the grand old plan which Musharraf wanted to do it, this is their ambition to take this area up to Karakoram. And what we did it with the China, whether it in Doklam, we have Wuhan Spirit, we have Trivandrum Connect, which is October 2019. But 15-16 June 2020, it is again a benchmark day. Galwan, Colonel Santosh Babu changed the whole narrative. And that's why you have heard when from Nibu, when the Prime Minister has given. So as far I'm very happy with with both Pakistan and China, we have got a very clear understanding now what we have to do it. And what you are seeing, it is now a thing which the China is getting it done. It is a collusivity, both militarily and also in the domain of whatever, say, militancy or whatever the name you want to do it. Al-Badr, Pakistani officials have met their people, 200 of them. They wanted to push it. And what is happening? Because they are pushing the Pakistan to do it again, because whatever, Mr. Vad is there or General Kakkar or everyone got it, that they want to revive it back, bring the insurgency or whatever you want to call it. But we are, the way the things are happening, and I'm very confident that these two dates on which we have come, this incident have happened because of Pakistan and China. We are totally them. Quad has been formed. The way we are doing in Indo-Pacific area, what we are doing into the area of Indian Ocean region, what we are doing in the northern borders, not only we will take on China, we will Pakistan, we will able to settle the score. This is I am very determined now, because clarity, the way we are going now, the way we are acquiring, the way the every forces are being given free hand to deal with it, I'm very sure we will get the result. Thank you. I rest my argument on this.
Thank you very much, sir. I think, right from the time 1979, which you brought out, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and how CIA got involved, how did it get ISI into its mold, and then how ISI helped Reagan to, break Soviet Union. But I'm 100% sure even at that time, the US would have never imagined that all that is going to turn east, because they were only their only concern was to break Soviet Union through Afghanistan, and by defeating Soviets in Afghanistan. And I'm sure they never thought that Ziaul Haq will prove so cunning and he will send all that was now with him after CIA had lost interest in Pakistan towards the east. And what I also hear is, as you said, that the Americans can go to any extent once a person serves their purpose. And we know what all happened. It didn't happen only with Ziaul Haq. It happened with many important people in the whole world. The other point because this issue, I think in days to come, we'll hear more of this issue. After all, when the People's Revolution succeeded in China in 1949 and People's Republic of China came into being, there is an old saying of Mao Zedong, and he said that Tibet is like a hand, and it has 5 fingers. Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, and Ladakh. Therefore, merely going into Tibet won't serve the purpose unless you control the fingers. So we can see a lot of things happening, which is directly pointing to the fact that even if Mao has left the scene, then Deng came and he's left the scene, but Xi Jinping stands firm to what he thinks China should do, and in the process create a whole. But obviously, things are not internationally as they were in 1949 when Mao said that. Therefore, there is a resistance to what Xi Jinping is doing, but it is a subject again which we hopefully discuss in future. But the fact is this, that this impacts Kashmir. And that's why these issues will keep coming up. Second point you said was that Uri was a Lakshman Rekha. And it is true that our modus operandi has shifted from merely extending hand of friendship for every violent act they do, and now we do a retaliatory, but we have still not done proactive. But hopefully things will improve further, and despite the fact that China has openly come in support of Pakistan, India should be able to, as it gets stronger day by day, it should be able to act proactively against a neighbor who is absolutely determined to oppose us on every issue, and thereby impacting Kashmir also in the process. Thank you so much, General Sinha sir. Thanks a lot. We'll shift to Dr. Ved. Dr. Ved, he's a veteran of Kashmir, retired as Director General of Jammu and Kashmir State. And if you really ask me, I don't think in Jammu and Kashmir anyone is more suited to speak about politics, to speak about insurgency, to speak about intra-party, inter-party and intra-party, and within the tanzims as authoritatively as a senior police officer like him can speak. And we are very eagerly awaiting to hear you, sir. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Colonel Tiku, and my gratitude to all the diaspora of Kashmiri Pandits. It is great to be here with all of you. And at the outset, I would agree with General Sinha. All this started in late 70s. What we see today in Kashmir, as all of you know, how General Zia-ul Haq and CIA conceived of this Bleeding India by 1,000 Cuts and Operation Topak and all subsequent events which unfolded. After Pakistan having failed in its attempts in 47, 65 and 71, this is what they planned, and the kind of insurgency which we witnessed later years. They had tried raiders, Qawwalis and all those modus operandi, but having failed. So this is the strategy they implemented. I at the outset would like to mention that the Kashmiri Pandits' exodus was definitely the lowest moment in our country's history, and we all feel guilty that we were all there and we could not stop this. Basically, as General Hasnain mentioned, when all this happened in January 1990, we were all there. I was there. We never imagined that this will happen. No one anticipated that this is going to happen, and how things suddenly unfolded. How there were announcements from the mass, how There were, in fact, some of the prominent personalities of Kashmiri Pandits were purposely targeted. Sudden exodus started happening, and the state and country, India as a nation, was not prepared for that. And in fact, today we are struggling with trying to bring them back to the Kashmir Valley's mainstream. That was, in fact, I would say, one major incident of failure of the India as a state. But let me also mention here that a lot of sacrifices have been paid by the security forces, army, paramilitary, J&K police, and all the police forces of the country. Today, if Kashmir is with India, it is because of their sacrifices. It's a huge price we have paid, and you know, the China and Pakistan's nexus, not from today, but our policy has been always be very, very defensive. In fact, of late, after Uri and after Pulwama, the offensive and then abrogation of Article 370, the offensive part of Indian diplomacy and offensive part of the Indian security establishment is being seen. As General Sinha was mentioning, we have always been accommodating. If Pakistan, there was an attack, there was a demand from political establishment to hold talks with Pakistan, and that kind of policy was not the right approach today when you look back. You know, in 90s how the radicalization of youth started, and it was with a plan that you ensure the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, radicalize the youth, and how all this was achieved by ISI, targeting leaders of the Kashmiri community, Kashmiri Pandit community, how they wanted to establish radical kind of Islam in the valley, which to some extent they did succeed. Then I remember in the early 90s, there was they targeted the intelligence sources of the security forces, the IB, the CID, state CID, and so that the security forces are made blind of things happening on the ground. How the security forces, in a big way, we had to induct, the Indian state had to induct the army. It was in the early 90s, I remember, we had very few troops in Kashmir Valley for the internal security duty, and how the troops of the army, the paramilitary, and SOG concept in later part of the 90, that is 93, 94, was conceived and formed. When initially JKLF was the major force in 90, but then how Pakistan changed the dynamics from JKLF to Hizbul Mujahideen to emerge as major terrorist organization, and demand changing from independence of Kashmir to merger with Pakistan. And then how the CAT operations had to be launched to get back the intelligence system in the Kashmir Valley. And in this period, high-profile incidents of Hazrat Bal Shrine siege, then Churare Sharif Shrine siege happened. and they started targeting Sufi shrines. Then how phenomena of Ikhwan was inducted, and how the Hizbul Mujahideen was basically, its influence was reduced to a very, very large extent using the Ikhwan, and the phenomena of Kuka Pare you are all aware of. Then came the phase of 95, 96, 97, when elections for the first time after 90 were conducted for the initially the parliament elections in 95, 96, and then 97 the state assembly elections were held, and the government of Dr. Farooq Abdullah it came to power. And after that, terrorism started coming down. But then suddenly the Kargil happened, and two major developments happened in this phase. The army had to be pulled out of border areas. As a result, a lot of gaps came in LOC area, and Pakistan, taking advantage of this, inducted in the valley a lot of foreign element during this phase, and the suicidal attacks started during this period, targeting the democratic structure of India and Kashmir Valley. There was an attack in the assembly, there was an attack of the parliament, and but then good thing is that 2002 there was elections, and a political government of PDP and Congress came. But let me mention here what General Atar Stan said. 2001 was the watershed year of Kashmir militancy. If you see all parameters of terrorism, this 2001 was the year where it was the peak, I would say, in last 3 decades of all parameters. The kind of weaponry which was inducted in Kashmir Valley, I would say you can arm two divisions of the any army with the kind of weaponry Pakistan inducted. So saying that the role of security forces has been any less, I think it is one of the best in the world. You put together, when I refer to security forces, Indian Army is definitely a major player, but then alongside the army, the paramilitary and J&K police played a pivotal role. Today, if J&K is part of India, it is because of the sacrifices of these forces. Otherwise, nowhere in the world the kind of weaponry which was inducted. Imagine the anti-aircraft guns I remember having seen. And it was not only a plan for Kashmir. This plan of the ISI was for creating mayhem all across the country. And that is how incidents of your 1992 bomb blast, serial blast in Bombay happened. Your parliament attack happened. Ayodhya attack happened. Many cities attacks in Bangalore, Ahmedabad, so many. You are aware of that. I don't want to repeat. Then the Mumbai attack of 2008. I recall interrogating a Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorist, and not one. In fact, I had the occasion of being a police officer in the field, interacting with many LET and JASH operatives. I was shocked in early 90s when one of them mentioned that, sir, Kashmir to हमने ले लिया, अब हमारी नजरें इंडिया पर हैं. Their plan of Ghazwe Hind was conceived in fact, LET and JASH were brainwashed for this. And today, look back, I think Kashmir, today India is much better. What their plans were, they would have seen us going mayhem and dying. But something like this didn't happen. We have suffered, of course. So many terror attacks happened, so many sacrifices happened. But today, as a country, India is emerging as strong as you can imagine. Then I was mentioning of 2002 when this joint government of Mufti Saeed and Congress came. Then terrorist incidents, violence started coming down. But then security forces were confronted with a situation of 2008 when Amarnath land row happened. And then 2009, 10 and 11, the violence on the streets of Kashmir Valley. So, then one important aspect I would like to mention here, which General Atta Hasnan was also mentioning, a landmark decision of coming up with the fence in 2001, 2002, that changed the dynamics to a very, very large extent. In fact, infiltration was brought down by 70 to 80% by the coming up of fence and also anti-infiltration grid, which multi-layered grid we came up. The number of terrorists operating came down from 2,000, 2,500 in early 90s to about a number of 200, 250 in late 2090 and 2020. But then 2014-15 onwards, the misuse of social media and internet started happening. And a poster boy like Burhan was projected. And violence on the street, which you are all aware of after the 2016, how the phenomena of encounter site, the terrorists trying to instigating the mob to come near, and stone pelting mobs, pelting stones on the security forces, trying to help the terrorists to escape. And then also the funeral, the burial processions, and terrorists coming there, firing in the air, in fact, showing heroism, motivating other young boys to join the terrorist ranks. This phenomena was also a very watershed phenomena in the. But then, after abrogation of Article 370 on 5th August, this strong decision of the government to stop handing over terrorist bodies to their family members, instead take them and bury them where we used to bury the foreigners in a forest area, and not allowing any terrorist encounter sites to be mobbed by stone pelting mobs. Now, this changed the dynamics of anti-security, anti-terrorist operations on the ground in Kashmir Valley. Then I would also like to mention how social media was being misused. I recall many parents approaching when I was DGP that how friendship offer is being it's coming from Pakistan to our children, and we don't realize how our boys are getting radicalized, and we come to know suddenly one day our son has joined terrorist ranks. This is how Pakistan was misusing the internet. And I am glad a strong decision of stopping the internet was taken. After all, you cannot deny a population in today's time the facility of internet, but certain curbs are required to be put to ensure misuse of terrorist ranks by the misuse of social media and internet. And I'm glad those things are being put into place. Then today, it is a fact that Pakistan in OIC, I don't want to be repetitive, my earlier panelists have mentioned it, is isolated. Saudi Arabia, its all-time, all-weather friend, has a cold-shouldered Pakistan. Today, the only three Pakistan's allies are China, North Korea, and Turkey, apart from Malaysia. So that is the condition it's finding itself in FATF. So China, we all know how it has been arming the terrorists in Northeast, in the left-wing Maoist terrorists. The role of China is known, but I don't know why my country has been very defensive. China has been pinpricking India in all UN forums, but we have been very, very careful in our criticism of China, in spite of the fact that for many decades China has been arming Northeast terrorists and also Maoists. Now, in Ladakh, China has been put to halt, and I think now is the time that India, India today is in a position to take on China, and I'm glad that many major decisions have been taken, including banning of many apps of China and also trade with China. Post-abrogation of Article 370, the major developments like Panchayati Raj system has been introduced, which was denied to people of Kashmir. Then it will definitely lead to emergence of new leadership. I'm hopeful with the district committees elections taking place. Challenges still remain in Kashmir. Like education system is same. We need to do something about it. I recall earlier, prior to 90, when school used to open, every child would sing national anthem. Today, it no more happens. So many things need to be done in education system. I don't have time. You need to bring transparency and honesty in administration. You need to do something about radicalization and de-radicalization. Then generating employment to the youth and engaging them. Infiltration grid is very, very robust. It needs to be strengthened. Then you need to keep a sharp edge eye on the Pak sympathizers and purge some of them in the administration. There is a radicalized youth, mass body of that in Kashmir Valley. We need to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ved, for your exposition of the ebb and flow of insurgency. I will straightway go to General Sunil Razdan because we don't have, we have eaten 5 minutes from his, but General Razdan, please, you take on, and I am not sure whether it is really required to introduce you. You are a well-known soldier, a highly decorated officer of Indian Army from the paratroopers, and has shed blood in the valley in the period when it was extremely difficult to function there, and has contributed immensely since then to the fighting of insurgency in Kashmir in various fora at the highest level of the government of India. General Sunil Razdan, all yours.
Namaskar Mara. First of all, to entire Kashmiri diaspora. And second point, which I would like to say that I've got 24 hours neural pain. In between, if I lower my head, please don't mind. Well, there are concrete proofs that Operation Topak, which was conceived in Staff College, Quetta, launched 1989 as a asymmetric warfare. It was asymmetric warfare which was launched. It had three main phases, and phase one, they had two. The launching was done by the Pakistan, and it was distinctly stated that in phase one, they will de-alienate the entire population, ensure that this entire region becomes Islamic or it becomes mono-religion area. In phase two, the administration as well as the police forces, that is the local police forces, the penetration in that, and third one was desertion, and finally bringing in United Nations as the go-between so that there can be a peacekeeping force in Kashmir, and thus the revenge of Bangladesh can be taken on India. This asymmetric warfare in the later form got changed into hybrid form warfare. There are concrete proofs available with us, so I don't want to dwell on that. But the Kashmiri Pandits, which were made to go into exodus, it was their seventh exodus, which is recorded. The most peaceful community, hard hit and thrown out of their roots. This is the irony. Now coming back, what had happened is that this asymmetric warfare and hybrid warfare, which was launched by Pakistan in latent collaboration with China. If you recall, China had given about $900 million to Taliban to ensure that the Russian equipment, the American equipment, and also the right for TAPI, that is Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, can be given, is peaceful, and finally the entire mining operation can go into the hand of China. Therefore, it is a misnomer on our part to understand that Pakistan alone did this job. Now, coming back to geopolitics and its impact by the action of security forces in entire region. As you know, geopolitics have got five main components. First is human, second is politics, third is culture, fourth is military, and fifth is strategy. At that time, in the earlier part, we did not have the power to ensure that our geopolitics is strong enough so that we can counter Pakistan. because Pakistan had friends like America, friends like UK, France, which was supplying Mirages and missiles, and Southeast Asian country plus China as such their backbone. The thing started changing when Indian forces started acting pragmatically, humanely, and efficiently, along with Jammu and Kashmir police and CRP. I recall when I was operating there in 1989, how Kashmiri Pandits were rescued from the areas which was dominated by these fundamentalists and safely taken out. India improved their fighting potential when, after you can say the physical barrier in 2000, by 2004, this physical barrier of fence came up. There was organizational change where RR was raised in 1990 and brought into the valley. Then the doctrinal change from defensive defense to offensive defense was taken up. And finally, now the comprehensive national power of the country, that is India, is employed against Pakistan, China combined. When I say comprehensive national power, it means all 11 factors or more of in which diplomacy, industry, security, economy, politics, all are involved in this. And that's how, first of all, Pakistan got isolated at the crucial time when China was building up CPEC. We started with Chabar counter, so that the approach to Afghanistan, which was very important for us, was opened up. The impact of military operations, or you can say operations by the armed forces, it opened up the access for Afghanistan. And Afghanistan started getting aid from us. In human component of geopolitics, India provided not only the skilled power from manpower from own side, but also trained the people of Southeast Asia and Afghanistan in gaining the skill, training them in pharmaceuticals, providing the human resources for disaster relief and natural calamities. This built up the relationship which is called under geopolitical umbrella. Now, starting from top to bottom, Myanmar was known as the legendary military autocracy. Slowly it got changed into a democracy, and it started realizing the effect that it was having by the insurgent group that were prevalent in that particular area. I had operated in that area, so I know it very clearly, that Kachin rebels, Karen rebel, Arakan Liberation Front, Rohingya Arakan Liberation Army, scores of them were roaming around there. In addition, NSC and Kaplan, that was active. So the military to military cooperation and Indian achievement during the early time in J&K also motivated these small countries like Myanmar. They are small but very important. Myanmar, Indonesia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. India went into trilateral. That is India, Myanmar, and Thailand. An overland link. It is how they created. I am privy to that information. It is Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces, which helped in that side. It created, facilitated military to military contact, diplomacy and diplomatic contacts. It also created the cultural revival of cultural contacts. It also built up the training of human resources at both ends. We learned from them, they learned from us, but the majority of learning was from our side, their side to our side. It was 2017, the Doklam incident, where India stood up against China, gave them a motivation that yes, we can fight. Meanwhile, in Kashmir, what was happening? The hybrid warfare was at its prime. The political parties were all singing their tune orchestrated by Pakistan. The militants were which were roaming around freely, were curtailed by Indian armed forces and police CPOs, police forces. The Operation All Out, which actually was denied by then the governor, Mr. Satyapal Male, and he stated that that there is no Operation All Out, but if you fire bullets, you will not get flasks. Operation Calm Down. And Indian Army was not only tackling things militarily, but also with humane action. Humane action is Op Megh Rahat. In addition, under Operation Sadbhavna, which I and Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain sir used to interact quite often, and we used to have long meetings on that. There we trained the people of Kashmir, provided them skills, women empowerment, construction of minor roads, irrigation, and then that the educational project, which was called initially the Kashmir 30, then it became 40, then Army 50. This is how Army built up their image and contact. There was a project under Sadbhavna, Jawan or Awam, Aman Hai Muqam. This was done at that time, and under that, 53 educational institutes were created. 2,700 the public schools were helped by arms. The sport facilities were created. Kashmir Premier League was created. It is very easy to say that army is only doing a military job. The amount of relief that Indian Army gave them during humanitarian mission when the floods were there, nobody's been there. And yet, because of that launching of hybrid warfare, the stone pelting started, they wanted to equate it with Palestine. Intifada. They wanted to make this there. But then, when the will of polity was demonstrated in the form of surgical strikes in response to Uri, the Operation Balakot, then things started changing. Meanwhile, the Indian traditional contact with Southeast Asia, which was there for since ancient times, trade, culture, people from Odisha used to go, Tamil Nadu used to go there, even Malayalis used to travel there, and they had their links. That got revived. That got revived because India demonstrated the political will and showed them a method of employing comprehensive national power against rogue states, rogue element, and stateless sectors. China used to go by an adage: in order to fight a barbarian, employ a barbarian. This is given in Confucius philosophy. Thereafter, Sun Tzu's Art of War, Sun Pin's military methods, they all talk about employment of barbarian against barbarian. They considered India as a barbarian, not as an ancient civilization. They, on our face, they used to say that you are ancient civilization like us. But come to think of it, they never had a proper culture. China, they had a martial race as a culture. And it is only later on when the Buddhism went from India, then they changed. That brought out by my co-panelist, the Eastern Ladakh incident, and before that, the Doklam made the China-Pakistan combined think as to India is not the India of the past, because the entire diplomatic force, entire military might and geostrategy was employed to ensure that Pakistan is brought to knees and China is put to the place. I was very pleased to see when in the Hong Kong agitation, the Indian flags were flown. They were so happy. And I heard the shout, "Run away, Indian army is coming." That was the impact of security forces on entire Asian subcontinent. We were able diplomatically and economically to wean away the Middle East from Pakistan. Middle East used to be a greatest supporter of Pakistan. They've totally taken out of the contact. Now Pakistan is treated as some banana republic. They don't give them any credence. Whereas India has got specialty. In a nutshell, I would say that since the Indian Army has done so much for Kashmiri diaspora, so my request is that Kashmiri diaspora should also build up a memorial for armed forces in the valley. It is a way to pay homage to unsung martyrs who laid down their life for Kashmiri diaspora. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind to my co-panelists.
Thank you, General Sunil Razdan. I think it was when you are fighting a war for 31 years and it is not a conventional war and it's a war by all other means except the conventional war, but there are more casualties than occur in conventional war, then this concept of using comprehensive national park, which, as you said, has 11 ingredients, maybe even more, gathers definitely a great importance. And more importantly, the other point that you mentioned was about the regional cooperation between states, which somehow have been, were not with us for no reason, because after all, we have had centuries old relations, civilizational relations with them. Therefore, there was always a requirement of looking at this problem holistically, not just at what is happening in Kashmir. Second point that you brought up was, which, of course, there was no time. Therefore, that's a subject which itself will need enormous amount of time, and that is Operation Sadbhavna and Rahat. You know, in when the militancy was at peak between 90 and between 89 and 96, when the first elections took place, during the time when Ikhwanis were there, as Dr. Ved had put it, the only people who were really functional on ground was the armed forces and the police forces, and most of the administration was run by them. Therefore, how people lived in those difficult circumstances, the credit entirely goes to security forces. Particularly, I'm talking about the border areas, where no one, either there were militants or there was the Indian Army or there was the police. So how did the administration run there? It's a great tribute to the armed forces and our security forces, central military para forces, who ensured that the administration is run as efficiently as it was possible in those difficult circumstances. We don't have much time now. In fact, we have overshot the time, but I would like to thank each one of you for your incisive comments, for a very detailed presentation of the issues at stake. As I said, Kashmir is a very, very many-layered, and it has got, so you remove a circle and then there's another circle and then there is another circle. So you, even if you deal with one circle, you will end up in the first circle, or you may not be able to even get to the next circle. But surely by constant interaction between ourselves, particularly with people who have spent a lifetime there and who have fought and sacrificed their comfort, sacrificed their life and limbs, security forces have a big stake. One thing is sure, that all of you brought out that I think we have reached a stage where political leadership has learned that dealing with Pakistan with kid gloves is not a solution at all. Second thing I wanted to say was, which Dr. Ved had put up about Ikhwanis. I think India has a problem, I mean, in the sense that we are not able to protect our assets in the valley, and we allow them to be killed. And they are mostly killed when political process is revived. And therefore, we need to be, at least India needs to be absolutely categorical in ensuring that its own assets in the valley are preserved, they are protected, security is given to them, so that, because they are the bedrock of any future strengthening of the country's interest in Kashmir. Thank you very much, sir, and each one of you for having been part of this discussion. We are truly grateful. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.